it's bad. And I see it with my clients when they come in, they're like, I just can't leave.
Welcome to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel with John McKenney and Padideh Jafari.
Padideh, it's good to see you.
Hi, John. How are you?
Very good. It's just not the same being together again like it was before. I so enjoyed being out there in LA with you, or actually in San Diego, and doing the recording. This is our first time recording again in a couple of weeks, and it's good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, nice to see you. How's everything in Atlanta?
Hot. It's been about 100 degrees every day for the last week and a half or 2 weeks. So my car is baking, and if you go outside, it is sweltering.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh, I don't like the sound of that.
No, it's a far cry from LA. So where the temperature is just always nice and moderate, and you enjoy really really temperate weather out there. So but it's good. And you know what I saw today? The new Naked Gun movie is coming out, so I am really excited about that. I got to tell you.
You and my husband, he's excited about that.
Oh, send him over. We'll go see it. I've actually got tickets for tonight, and it did really well on Rotten Tomatoes. It almost got a perfect score. So, and anything with Pamela Anderson, it can't be bad.
Agree. And I'm so happy she's dating again. She's dating Liam.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, Liam Neeson, who lost his wife on a ski accident, and she was a famous actress as well. And he said he would never get remarried, and that was the love of his life. Mm-hmm. And here he is, years later with Pamela Anderson. They say that they're dating.
Now, did you know that Liam Neeson is the star of The Naked Gun? So maybe they met on set.
Correct. Yes, I believe that's the case. So
we wish them well.
Yes. So I have exciting news because I have my friend here in studio with me, Scott Silverman. Say hello.
Hello. I could do that.
Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about Scott. He's a renowned crisis coach, family negotiator. He has won the CNN Hero of the Week renowned recipient. I had never heard that.
Wow. No, I didn't know that was an award. That's amazing.
Yes.
It sounds amazing.
So he has delivers insights for over 40 years of working with individuals across all socioeconomic spectrums, and he has just written and published a book called, wait for the title, You're Not God. That Job is Taken.
I like that.
That's such a great title, right?
I know some people I can give that book to already.
So we want to welcome you to the studio, Scott, and this is a great honor to have you.
Thank you so much. Really great to be here.
So today we're going to talk about, John, you want to tell us what we're going to talk about today?
Trauma bonding.
Yes, trauma bonding and addiction, actually, which is one of Scott's specialties because he talks about addiction a lot. So what do you think about that title? Trauma bond and addiction.
It can't get any more fun than that. And I think they're interwoven. We were just kind of looking at an updated definition of trauma bond, which kind of reminds me, of the Stockholm Syndrome, where there is somebody who's actually, the term I like or prefer is holding someone hostage. And it's usually the victim, if you will, and domestic violence is a huge problem. And it's part of that stigma, just like addiction. People don't talk about it, and it goes on a lot. And it's interesting, I'm in the Jewish faith, and we have a lot of it. We've had actually a lot of growth over the last 20 years with that going on. And because there's different sects of our faith and different levels of commitment, and a lot of it's dictated by the man, if you will, in many cases. And it's something that is treatable, but until it gets discovered, there's usually someone who's in harm's way for quite some time. And the addiction side of it is someone's generally mood altering, and self-medicating to try to deal with it one way or another.
Yeah. Now, Scott, let's go back to the origins of this. You talked about Stockholm Syndrome a little bit. That actually goes back to war and captivity, does it not?
Correct. Well, where the individual who is, dealing with the victim, that victim falls in love or gets connected to the batterer, if you will, and they believe that it's their job to do whatever needs to be done to console, confirm, or comply with that individual. That's why I see the similarity with the trauma bond.
Hmm. And how does somebody find their way to trauma bond? That they just get involved with a narcissist and it happens. Did it happen in all cases or most? Or talk to us a little bit about that.
I think my experience, dealing with families is it's kind of way you ask that question. Then no one really travels down the road to, oh, hey, honey, let's go to trauma bond land. It's just it's a happenstance of what happens when there's somebody who is in many cases a narcissist or suffers from a God complex and believes that their way is the only way, and everyone in the family will do exactly what they say, or there's going to be a consequence. And that consequence is creating the trauma, and trauma untreated only gets amplified.
Yes.
Trauma untreated only infects the entire family. I mean, one of the things that we work with veterans here a lot in San Diego at Confidential Recovery in our Veterans Navigation Center, and what we've learned about PTS and the studies show that if somebody comes back from events with the military, and their PTS goes untreated, it's like the flu, if you will. The rest of the family gets PTS.
Wow.
So
Wow.
with untreated trauma, what happens is everyone can be impacted by it.
Interesting. Interesting. So as you know, our audience is a group of people primarily who are interested in narcissism, not because they are them, because narcissists wouldn't spend the time on a podcast like ours, but because people think they're victims of narcissistic abuse. What are some of the key signs, that we can talk about here today that would help somebody know if they're in trauma bond or not? I know I think in my own relationship, and I was married to a covert narcissist for 27 years, or like I tell people when they ask, how long were you married? About 90 years. It felt like that, at least.
Yeah.
Um,
What,
I was in a position where I felt like I was so emotionally connected, um, and met with a therapist who's like, why are you doing this? And it was very hard to kind of get away from that emotional connection. Is that kind of what it is, or what are some of the signs of this?
well, I think it's very similar when you speak of it that way, and you mentioned covert, and it probably in some ways might have been overt as well. The addiction in a family, it's 15% of our population suffers from some form of addiction, untreated addiction, and the balance of the people around them, because it's a family disease, also suffer
Yes.
from the consequences of that addiction. And when you think about the person who's got the problem in the addiction field, if you will, 15% suffer from addiction, but 8 people are impacted negatively by that person who has the addiction. So you think
Wow.
about that, that's 85% plus of our country right now that are being impacted
Wow.
by it. So when you factor in the trauma piece, and a lot of what, trauma, in my opinion, and I'm not a clinician or a doctor, but my experience is it's kind of like if you have an illness and it goes untreated, it gets worse because it doesn't start as trauma, but it builds, and then trauma on top of trauma, untreated, creates all kinds of underlying issues. And most people who don't process it are going to either implode or explode. And unfortunately, it's got to be treated. Just like when people say, "Well, gee, I do interventions," and they say, "Can you come get my son and just take him somewhere?" And please don't bring him back. We'll pay you. I said, no, that's not how it
Yeah.
works. And in families, it's kept very secret. It is a stigma. It's not something soccer moms talk about.
Right.
It's not something that goes on when people meet at pickleball and go, oh yeah, I'm living with an abusive significant other and I don't know what to do with them. They don't say that out loud because then it looks like they're vulnerable, they're weak, and then they're also sitting in an abusive relationship. And so it's really hard to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that, in my marriage, my past marriage, that's exactly what it was. I mean, I was a divorce attorney being abused by a malignant narcissist, and I couldn't tell anyone. Part of it because I was trying to protect his image, And the other part of it was, okay, fine, you go and tell someone, now there's repercussions to that, and they're going to tell you to leave the person. And I knew that sort of in the back of my mind, and I wasn't ready. And so it took 7 years. So to your point, it's like addiction, like families, we've had addiction in our family, so I can also speak to that. You put your head in the sand and you just think the person's going to get better, but the more you do that, the worse the person gets. And so it's not until you establish, healthy boundaries and say, no, I'm not going to be manipulated by the addict anymore, that they sort of will hit rock bottom, right? Because once you close the door to them, that's when they'll realize, oh my gosh, I'm alone in this. Is that true?
I think it's a common outcome, when you're the victim, if you will, or the recipient of the abuse, because it's really hard to tell somebody, you're abusing me. You don't have that, because it builds over time and they chip away at it. And it's not really a conscious effort. It's more of a subconscious behavior where they will grow on it. And if they've got a substance abuse issue, it gets amplified. So it isn't just, I don't like you, or you're not doing things I want you to do, or
Yes.
you don't like me. It just builds over time, and there's outside influences. And we've seen with COVID, we've seen things amplified like I've never seen anything like this before. There's a level of inability to process feelings now that we've never seen before. Just because,
Wow.
and there's no studies around it because we never had that kind of experience. And there's a younger generation coming up now. You young people, where kids were at home with COVID, and they spent so much time on the internet, and they weren't having that social interaction with others. And parents were frustrated because they weren't at school. Relationships got strained because of what was going on with the economy, loss of jobs, all the trauma around that event. And there's no studies yet, and we're going to know in probably about it's 5 to 8 years when studies start getting done, because we're seeing this issue going on with some of the catastrophic events that people are doing when they're acting out. I mean, look at that current shooter in New York.
Yes.
That just
Yeah.
it's insane. When I was growing up, we'd take a bag of dog poop and put lighter fluid on it and ring the doorbell, and people would come out
Right. I
stepping.
remember I just want to take a moment here to say that Scott said that I was a younger generation for all those listening, because that is not the case, Scott. I am much older than I look, but I just wanted to take that moment to say that.
To be honest, I'm not gaslighting you. I'm just fabricating the truth my own comfortable way.
Oh, okay, that sounds good.
That's hilarious.
So, but I think it comes back to the stigma. The fact that we're talking about this today, think
Yes.
about it.
Amazing.
I don't do that very often, and I have a podcast that we talk about these kind of things all the time because we can. We don't have any limitations to it, and we think it's important, and we bring people in who've had different experiences, But I was just thinking about, this topic today, and there was this couple I was working with a couple of years ago. He was a lawyer, and she was a doctor, and he wanted me to fix her. So, and he was about to turn her in to the AMA, which was pretty bold.
Wow.
And he was threatening her with that. So she was actually a victim, if you will, of his abuse. And she, because her ego, she was the doctor, and she had a major drinking problem. And he says, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, let me talk with her." And most doctors, and this, I think she was just finishing her residency, was working 18 hours a day.
Wow.
And when we spoke, she said, I only drink when I drive home. And I said, "I'm sorry, what?"
Okay.
"Oh, I only drink, in the car, so I'm by myself." I said, "But you're in the car, the freeway." And but she said, "That's the only time I drink." I said, "Okay." So I tried to get a three-way conversation, but neither one of them wanted to have that conversation together because they didn't want their dirty laundry to be exposed to a third party. Although each one of them was telling me about it.
Yes.
So, I tried to do an intervention with him because in many ways they were forcing each other. They were amplifying each other's behavior. They were both gaslighting each other. It was a duality of domestic violence from both of them at each other
Wow.
because of the narcissism.
Yes.
And neither one of them took responsibility for their own behavior, and each one of them blamed the other for what was going on. So, those are the kind of things that one day it just explodes, or somebody gets up and leaves because they can't take it anymore. But in many cases, they're pointing the finger at somebody else. And that's
Do you
part of
think
that denial.
do you think most people have any clue that they're trauma bonded when they're in a situation like that?
I don't think so, and I think that's what trauma means with bonding. I mean, if you've gotten to the point where you're bonded, it's kind of like plastic getting too hot and sticking together. You're
Yeah.
just you can't separate from it, so you're both kind of on that vortex of pain.
I can tell you that with my situation, it felt like he was my drug dealer. Even when we separated, it was so difficult, Scott. Like I had to move, and everybody knows my story that's, been a follower of ours. I had to move to New York. Like I literally had to
Full
physically,
geographic.
yes, physically move for like I lived there actually 13 years. I was bi-coastal, but for 2 years he didn't even know where I had gone because I had to get away from him because there was that trauma bond. It was like, and once I didn't know the word for it obviously, but now I do, and it's bad. And I see it with my clients when they come in, they're like, I just can't leave. I can't leave. And I'm like, well, let's go through the scenarios, and I walk through them with them, and then I always recommend a psychotherapist, right? Because I can't do that emotional side of it for them. But it's really bad. I mean, it's really devastating.
And when they're on fire, it's hard to have a conversation with somebody. When they're just dancing around on fire. It's interesting when you describe that. We used to have an MFT, marriage family therapist, on our team, and I used to share about how when I ran the nonprofit, we're a family business, and he says, we're really not, because you're technically the father. You're the dad. And when you describe what he was doing, it's almost like when your dad says something or your mom says something, it's law. You just follow it. And when we get into those, because it's the person theoretically who you wedded because of strong feelings and a connection. So there's that special part that you want to give them every benefit of the doubt. You want to
Yes.
give them as much time as possible. You want to make every excuse in the book that you can. And part of that pushing away but pulling back is the bond. And the trauma is the behavior that you're receiving, and you're not processing it because you really don't believe it's happening. And when you tell others, the first thing they say is, why don't you get out of there? Or you're making it up, or you're too sensitive, or that can't be true, because if it was, why would you stay there?
Correct, 100%. So they're gaslighting you without even knowing that they're gaslighting you. And so that becomes another trauma on top of the trauma.
The victim, in many cases, is gaslighting themselves.
Correct.
You were saying, I can deal with this. I'm a mature person. I chose this person. We chose each other. We can get past this. The problem is if there's an illness or there's a behavior or there's a twist in the brain or they have untreated trauma. And it's interesting. Most cases of untreated trauma go back to most people's childhood.
Correct.
And it happens at a young age, and it never gets treated over time. And what happens is it becomes like this cancer that, like the integrator of the brain, everything goes through that. So when it hits you, it's 100 times worse than it would be normally because it's already amplified inside your body, mind, and soul. Those aren't necessarily the therapeutic terms, but I think they're easy for people to understand because it's like, when people call me and say, well, how do I? Well, you don't go on YouTube. If someone's got a mental health issue, it's too opaque. You go see a specialist. And when families tell me we're gonna love them, but you're loving them to death, and you become a victim as well.
I mean, that's the interesting thing. Stockholm syndrome is somebody who's trauma bonded perhaps to a captor, but when you're trauma bonded perhaps to a spouse or to a parent, love muddies the water, trying to figure out or distinguish between genuine love for somebody and I'm not going to give up on them and marital commitments and all of that versus, okay, I'm being abused for somebody, which particularly for men, and I work primarily with men, is a tough admission anyways, even to oneself. and then to acknowledge the trauma bond and to sift through that versus genuine feelings of love for somebody is a difficult process at best.
Oh, and well, with men, it's even worse because between the ego and the self pride, and the you're in charge and you're supposed to be responsible, and you're the provider, and you're
Yes.
supposed to look good and be hip, slick, and cool all the time. It's even tougher, and that's part of the denial part of it. I think it just compounds the problem. And when you think about trauma, it's something that we talk a lot about, and the way I've understood, like EMDR, which is one of the techniques to deal with trauma, is trauma gets stuck in this, little box in your brain, and you need techniques to open that box and take that stuff out. It won't work. You can't organically wish it away or will it away. And you can only meditate to a certain point. It's going to take therapeutic support, maybe working with different groups and other individuals, like-minded individuals who've suffered from it, and accepting the fact that, it's not your fault.
Right.
It's not your
Hmm.
fault when you're the victim. And people, when they're victims, they think that there must be something I'm not doing right.
Right. Well, the guilt is really strong too, right? Because you're detaching from the person who has been your supplier for so many years. And so there's a lot of guilt there. We talk about that in one of our episodes that I had 2 years worth of guilt. I felt like, oh my gosh, I've left this person. Is it my fault? Could I have done things differently? And only the empath really does that, right? The narcissist doesn't do that because they've already moved on to the next relationship. And so it was very difficult. And the process of healing for me, it took. So I was with him for 7 years, and it took exactly double the time. So it took 14 years. And I would say that I still get triggered sometimes. And, I have a wonderful husband now that knows when I get triggered, and I'll say, that's kind of triggering. And so he knows where that comes from. And so mine was a lot of like sexual abuse as well with him. And so it's exactly right. Like I couldn't do it by myself. I needed to go to therapy. I worked out. I was very, always at the gym, doing a lot of meditation. I was close to my, family at the time, and then also working out was very important in my life.
Yeah, and it's punitive for you to have to go through all of that when, in theory, not theory, in fact, you were the victim.
Correct.
And but if you didn't do that, you know, how do you know how things might have ended up if you didn't work on yourself? And it takes what it takes, like that saying, it takes what it takes. But for so many people, they don't have the inner strength. They don't have other family members they can rely on, and they get stuck. And there's nothing they can do because they're too afraid to leave, meaning the alternative they feel would be worse than what they've got there going on. And the narcissist doesn't even, it's narcissist blames everybody else.
Correct.
If you were this or you were that, or you do this or cook dinner half an hour early, or wash my car, or take the clothes out, or take the cat out, whatever, and they blame everybody else. It's never their fault. They never take responsibility for anything until they're usually handcuffed, and behind bars or on a
Yes.
on a gurney at the emergency department because of something happened because of their behavior.
And for me, it was always kind of like a moth to a flame. Somebody who's trauma bonded wants to. If you feel like you're kind of electrically connected to somebody like that. I can remember when I finally got to the place, my therapist had said, "Look, you really kind of need to emotionally disconnect." It did feel like withdrawal. Your whole world is kind of upended, and where your natural or learned tendency is to go and go right back to that person, even though you know it's going to be an abusive relationship. Your heart wants to go do it anyway. So it really can be difficult. Not to mention, I would guess that if you don't do your homework on trauma bond and why you're trauma bonded and what it is and how it impacts your life, ultimately you can find another flame, and that flame may be very similar. I think this is really part of the healing process is discovering what trauma bond has been for you and what kind of person you're trauma bonded to, so that ultimately you don't put yourself in the same kind of situation again, which is essentially moving from one drug of choice to another.
And when I hear you, I thought I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, 29 years. Is that what it was in a relationship?
Oh, you added 2, but that's fine. It felt like more.
Yeah, I think you said felt
It
like
was
90 or
yeah,
something.
it was 27.
So
Yes.
when someone says to you, you need to emotionally detach, I mean, what does that even mean? I mean, and if you've
Oh,
never done,
absolutely.
if you've never done it before, how do you, if you don't have the tools or a roadmap or GPS or footprints in the sand, you don't have a mechanism to do that. That's when people say, "Oh, you need to leave that person." Well, you don't know how. I mean, I see it all the time in working with people in early recovery when someone says, "You need to find a higher power." Well, wait, if there was a God in my life, why am I here? Why has my entire family left me? Why did I lose my home? Why did I file bankruptcy? Why is my business gone? Why am I, dealing with a felony on parole right now? Well,
Right.
and that's part of the untreated trauma is they want to blame somebody else. And most people blame their parents. And when your parents are gone and you keep blaming your parents, to me, it's a comfortable explanation so you can keep the dysfunction going, and intervening on that takes a lot because it's really, I'm working with a family now. It's incredible. Separated mom, dad, child in their 30s. Everyone's pointing the finger at everybody, and it's uncomfortable. And it's interesting because I'm getting emotionally um, kind of connected with them because of my empathy. But I've got to get my boundaries going because it's important. And they're nice people and they have great story, and they're not from here, so they have a nice accent and they're easy to listen to until they start fighting. So it's amazing, and I do this all the time. But it's shocking sometimes how people. It reminds me of the flood in Texas where people just get sucked up in this river, and they don't have a choice.
Right.
You talk about a bond because a bond takes time where something like that happens in an instant and all of a sudden you're out of control. And no one has tools for things like that. You can prepare and practice, but when you're in that stuff, it can be horrible.
It's interesting. You kind of described two different means of discard almost with a narcissist. You have the flood, which is instantaneous, and some people who are trauma bonded are subject to the flood that just comes in quickly, where they're discarded and they've got this bond to this person. I know I was talking to somebody just a couple of weeks ago in a coaching setting who had been gone from his narcissist for I think a year and a half or 2 years, and she discarded him. And in an instant, his life is upended, and he's left with this bond to her and trying to figure out, even to the point of tears, years later, how to go manage life without her when he genuinely loved her, even in another relationship with somebody else and still having problems with this. And trying to work through this bond to somebody who's discarded him versus somebody who perhaps is in a relationship with a covert narcissist like I was, where she ain't leaving because she wants to protect her image above all else. So the abuse continues and the gift keeps on giving day after day after day. And the narcissist victim has to somehow find the courage to go walk away from all of this when everything inside them, because of the trauma bond, is saying, stay, stay, stay. It'll get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. There's a happily ever after when there's really not.
When the narcissist, what I've seen from the other side of that, when the narcissist loses their audience, they just grow up like a little baby and cry. Meaning it's almost
Yep.
like kryptonite with Superman. And when you can help empower someone to move away from that, the narcissist will generally chase for long periods of time. They won't give up because that was kind of how they got
Their supply.
their
They call
supply.
it supply.
Yep.
And that's what
Yeah.
my therapist told me too. He said, because when my therapist said, you have to leave, you have to go somewhere, and we made a plan for where I was going to go. That's exactly what happened. And I said, well, what if I don't open the door? Because I was living it with my mom. I had gone back and lived with my mom. And he's like, don't you understand? Don't you know this already? He's going to come knock on your mom's door because he has no shame. And that's exactly what he did. So when I moved to New York City, he would come and knock on my mom's door and say, where is she? And my mom's like, older lady, and she's like, I don't even know. I don't know where my daughter is. And she had to lie to him because he wanted to track me down because I was his supply.
You were his oxygen.
Correct.
You're how he breathed. Without you, he couldn't be what he was.
Correct. And it was interesting because he was already in another relationship, but of course that didn't matter, right? So that's why for 2 years I cut everything and I didn't speak to him. And then it was after I was sort of healed and understood what it was. I didn't know it was narcissism, by the way.
Right.
I just thought, okay, he's toxic. We used to say that word a lot. He's toxic. That he found out because I had to finish the divorce and everything. And he was like, oh, that's where you escaped to. And I was like, yes, that's exactly where I escaped to. I escaped from you. And I was able to say that.
Yeah.
But
and he still chases you.
oh yeah, he still Scott doesn't know that. He still DMs me. So yeah, I mean it's difficult. So when my clients come in and they say, I want to do a consultation with you, but I'm not ready to pull the plug, I totally empathize with them. I understand why. And I'm like, look, we can do as many consultations as you want until you're ready to finally leave the situation, because you have to escape. You can't really do it sort of voluntarily. And then they'll come back like months later and they'll say, okay, now I'm ready, because now they've like built up the courage. I send them to therapy. Obviously, I think that's important. And so when they're ready, that's when we pull the plug.
Well, because it's difficult to, pull people, even push people. And the longer I've been doing this and working with others, and I got called in to work with this group out of, I won't tell you what state, but they asked me to speak with them, and they're all retired and very comfortable, and they want to do something.
Sounds like Florida.
Arizona, it's kind of similar. No humidity or big bugs. But I decided, I went to my higher power and I said, give me the strength to not take a position with this group. And my position was, well, if you don't want to, that's okay. And I thought I've completely failed the group that wanted me to help them. And then 2 days later, I got this email thanking me, and they want me to come back in August, and they're going to bring a group 4 times the size. And they loved my okay philosophy. It's okay. Meaning, if you don't want, my attitude when the interventions is, if things are going okay, don't change anything. And that makes people think. Because if someone's gotten to me, it's not because,
it's not okay.
It's not like their grilled cheese sandwich was burned in the pan. I mean, if someone's talking to me, it's because, and I have people, because when I do media, I give my phone number out all the time, 619-993-2738. And I encourage people to call me. I love when my phone rings and it's a stranger, because for me, it's an opportunity to maybe not go to a funeral. And that's how I like to think. I mean, and that may, some people say, well, that's a little sadistic. Well, it is what it is, and I love doing that. And I want to drink from a fire hose because I don't want to go to funerals anymore. And the morbidity rate right now, with the opioid crisis and with alcoholism and mental health issues and with suicides, we've never seen it this high as a country. And we're not talking about it. And I would be willing to bet, well, I know for a fact, and 85% of domestic violence issues, at least in our community, and I'm sure we're a sample, there's substance abuse involved, significantly. And with all the illicit drugs out there today, and with fentanyl and with the cartels working hard to keep America supplied, we have to get better, be better, and do better.
Absolutely. And not to mention, so many who are in narcissistic abuse that I've talked to who are victims of this stuff wind up finding themselves in addiction on the other end of it because they're trying to cope. So addiction figures in on the far side of it too.
Compulsive obsessive addictive behavior is kind of a moniker of a narcissist, in my opinion. I mean, it's part of that ability to do it. And narcissism can come from, anywhere from sports, dancing, athletics, chefs. It doesn't matter. Students, teachers, there is no boundary around. There's no zip code for it. It's everywhere. And domestic violence has gotten a lot worse because, who yells at you more than family? I mean, we'll do stuff with family we won't do with a complete stranger because
Totally.
We know that what can they do? Get mad and throw a glass of water on us. So, and of course I have a daughter who's in the field, so we talk a lot about, abuse and how it goes on. And there's help and hope for it, is what I want to say. There are ways to get help and hope. And I hope people can, when they ask me, I said, well, tell me more.
So let's say that somebody is listening to our podcast today and they've kind of just discovered recently what even narcissistic abuse is, and we're talking about trauma bond, and they understand this connection. It's kind of like a moth to a flame, drawing them back to something that's going to kill them, or hurt them significantly. What would you say to those people? How do they begin the process of recovery?
The simple way is education, and then prevention. And in order to get educated, you have to get knowledge. So A, you call me. B, you can go online. I mean, probably easier to go online because you're probably up at 3 a.m. worrying about, what the kids are going through and
Yeah.
how you can be a better dad or a better mom, or because the part of a domestic issue that goes on when you have children is they're witnessing it.
Yes, 100%.
And they will emulate that, good, bad, or indifferent. So, part of parenting, in my opinion, is to be a better role model, or be a role model that, is cognitive of having a good balance of happiness and joy, and it, being a family that works hard. I mean, there's science around the fact that families who have dinner 3 times a week together and talk have a whole different outcome with their children. So, to get the education, if you will, go online and just say trauma bond, or I think I'm living, or what's the definition of a narcissist? Keep it simple,
Yeah.
and what is the definition of a victim? And start thinking about it. And before you start talking to people about what you've read, try to process in your head, and maybe seek professional help to find out and sort out what it is that you're, discovering in your current journey. So before you blurt out to, your significant other, I've just read that you're a narcissist.
Oh yeah, never say that.
It's
Definitely
it's
not.
like telling
Yeah.
a drunk, you have a drinking problem. Well, how do you know
like-
that? Well, because you're
it's like
throwing up on yourself on
loading
the
a
floor.
like loading a bullet in the chamber of a gun for them that they're pointing at you. It's just more ammo for them to use
Well, they're
against you
triggered,
ultimately.
literally called trigger words. Don't
Yeah.
don't give them the ammo, because they'll get better at what they do, which means you're going to be subject to more pain and more trauma.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, definitely don't. And we don't say that in court either. I'm sure your daughter would testify to that. Like, we never say the word narcissist. And a lot of times our client will say, can't we just tell the judge, he or she's a narcissist? And I'm like, absolutely not. But what we do is
Because the judge could be.
correct. The judge could be, the attorney could be, right? I mean, there's so many things. So what we do is we say, keep a journal. So we know, and go back as far as you can. I'd say timeline sometimes, because with my male clients, they're like, what's a journal? I say, do a timeline and give me examples. And we can tell the judge these examples of what the person did that were narcissistic without using those words.
Yeah. Did you say the males say what's a journal? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they don't like journaling as much. I find that some of my clients, they don't like journaling. They're like, I don't really want to write down my thoughts. I'm like, okay, that's okay. So just do a timeline so that I can see it. And then sometimes I'll look at their timeline and I'll say, okay, you need to be a little bit more detailed here. Tell me what that. So yeah, I don't know.
Is that a gender deficiency, you think?
I mean, I know John journals, but
For decades, I love it.
I've asked my husband to journal and he won't do it. But he'll write down things in his notes, but he doesn't consider that journaling.
Well, if you like journaling, I'll tell you a secret a lot of people don't know. Each one of us has an inner child. I don't know if you believe that or not, but I
do.
I have
Sure.
I have a little Scotty, and when I was going through my training with that, they said you have to go out and you have to find a stuffed animal that represents your inner child. Well, coincidentally, mine is Woody Woodpecker. Go figure. But what's interesting is if you write with your opposite dominant hand, that's your inner child.
Interesting.
Wow.
Give that a try.
Huh.
Even though you may not do it well, just go, hey, little Scotty, how are you today? And watch how your heart melts. This is my experience. And what starts to come from that. So if you like journaling, this will take you to another level that just will make you smile.
Wow, we got to do that, John.
Not together,
Absolutely.
separately first. Compare notes, and then you can do it as a group.
Okay, sounds good. Well,
Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic process for me. I always found that just the act of coming up with the words to write on the page helps you sift your thoughts and emotions very naturally in a way that nothing else does. And as you do that, insight comes to you from, what, as you call our higher power, we call God here, but it comes to you, and it really does help. And the other thing for journaling for me, for those of you who are going through narcissistic abuse, if somebody's gaslighting you and you're recording exactly and quickly afterwards, you're recording exactly what they say, when they come back to you and say, I didn't say that, I said this, I didn't say that, I said this, you can go back to your journal and refer to exactly what they said, and it'll keep you sane throughout that process too. So it's a fantastic recovery tool, I think.
Yeah, I know we're going to short of time. I'm going to give you one more nugget.
Please do.
It's a tool that I've used for 40 years, and it's called a God box. And I have an old shoebox, and what I do with that is I take my notes, meditation, complaints. I got a special because I was starting to whine a lot about my wife, because sometimes when she's in the room breathing, I get a little irritated. So, but that's my problem. So I got a little tiny Post-it note for her that I got 8.5 by 11 for me. So I write in there, and then I fold it up and I put it in my God box. And what happens is it empowers me to not be burdened with whatever that is at that moment. And I put it in a little, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it a tray or drawer. I call it a God box, because when I give something to God, if you will, or my higher power, I have both because I have duly diagnosed. So I want one for each.
Yes.
But I put it there, and it helps me. It lightens my load. I could, without having to see a therapist or call it, a hotline or, a crisis line, I feel better because I feel lighter. And it's an easy tool to give anybody. It doesn't cost any money, and you make up your own. I've seen people, they send me pictures. They spend 100 hours decorating it, airbrushing it, and putting their kids' hair and this and the toenails, and oh my God. But you could do all that. And I've been doing it I filled mine up after 10 years, and I called my sponsor at the time. So he goes, let's go down to the bay, and we'll find a fire ring, and we're going to burn it and put it in the heavens. And then I started over again. So
I love that.
I love that too. I'm going to go start that, and I'm going to have one from my husband too. So anyway, it was so nice to have you on today's
privilege,
Scott. And
Thank you, guys.
How can people find you? How can people get your book? I know John and I definitely want to get your book as well.
Absolutely.
Scott H. Silverman, just Google me or call me, 619-993-273. And people go, I don't call me. I absolutely dare you and challenge you and invite you. And no matter where you are in the world, and if you're thinking, I don't know what I'd say, well, just don't call and hang up. Call and just say, I heard you, I saw you, and I have a question. And ask the question. I mean, we're not going to spend an hour and a half. I'm not flying out to your home, unless you have a private plane and you want to bring us together and we'll go see John. Well, we'll wait till it's a little cooler weather. Come out to San Diego. Yeah. I mean, right now it's just beautiful here.
He was just here. He was here 2 weeks ago because we had a podcast launch party, and he came to the studio, which was so nice to have him. But I really hope and pray that this episode was good for our listeners. I feel like, because I wish that I knew what Trauma Bond was 15 years ago.
Yes.
But thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. It was an honor talking to both of you, and I do hope that someone gets the message.
Oh, Scott, it really has been an honor and a pleasure. And honestly, in addition to being hilarious, you're deeply kind, and to make yourself available to people like that is amazing. So thank you so much for being here. And we do look forward to another time with you. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Again, thank you, Scott, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit www.narcissistabuserecoverychannel.com, and be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle narc.podcast. The guest views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are their own. The information presented is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. The co-hosts are not licensed therapists. Seek professional help, as information is often state-specific. The Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel is produced in studios in California and Georgia.